Good morning. Breakfast with the Broker every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We're here at Pod Populi in Boca Raton again, in an amazing podcast studio. And I have the actual owner of Pod Populi. So here comes the introduction. And now, by way of Santa Monica, California, he is the CEO founder at Great Love Media. He's a creator and national host at the Great Love Debate and the Great Love Debate podcast. He's an author of How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. He has been featured on ABC, NBC, Fox, CNN, The New Yorker, New York Times, and many more publications. He is America's #1 relationship enthusiast. He is Brian Howie.
Wow, that was good. Who knew? Wow.
So thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
They say relationships, are a big deal these days. And, real estate kind of has relationships too. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that.
Well, everything's about relationships. I always say that I'm in the passionate conversation business, and relationships can be involved in some of that. I have been a writer, director, producer in Hollywood for a long, long time. And I wrote a tongue-in-cheek dating book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds, which actually has some reasonable advice in it. But mostly it was about people blaming and not taking control of their own dating fates. And that was 2013. And my agent at the time said, rather than, tour around, go a little book tour with 20 people in a Barnes & Noble, why don't you raise some of the questions that the book raises in sort of a theater, like a town hall style forum, and sort of stimulate the conversation. So we were supposed to do one of those as sort of a one-off, January 14th, 2014 in Santa Barbara, California at the Center Stage Theater. It went so well that in 2 weeks, I do my 436th show. I have done it in 13 countries and 135 cities all around the world. So it became something called the Great Love Debate. And it blew up from there. About a year into that, Adam Carolla, who some of your listeners may know, came to me and says, how come you don't have a podcast? And I said, I don't know how to do a podcast. And he said, let me help you do a podcast. Come into my studio, be part of the network, do a podcast. He took the hard parts of podcasting away from me, and it turned into a big, successful podcast, and on and on and on. And now we're here in this studio, sort of doing the same thing for other people. So
I think it's amazing. So what you said some advice and some reasonable advice you get in the or tips in the relationship business in your book. Give us like one or two tips that you.
Well, I mean, the crux of all of it pretty much comes down to the women want the men to try harder, and the men want the women to make it easier. That's it. That's the disconnect. And the problem with that is how we perceive things. I think men are fundamentally more optimistic about it. The women look for red flags. The men look for green lights. And we are constantly, and if anything, the last, 5-10 years have made everybody already a little bit more antagonistic towards each other. And people get set in their ways and don't want to get out of their comfort zone. The good thing that happened though recently, or at least, as I've noticed traveling around the world, 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, a lot of men and women are like, you know what? I don't need another person. I have my wine and my dog and my yoga class. I don't need to date. I'll be just fine. And if people were forced to experience that in sort of real time, be taking out of that loop. And I think people missed it, and people missed that connection and missed that human interaction. And so I think a lot of people, at least on the dating landscape, and again, I'm no dating expert. My job is to raise the questions, not necessarily provide the answers, but I've raised a lot of questions, and we've heard from hundreds of thousands of people. People do want that. People do want to be in a meaningful relationship, whether that is a business partnership, whether that is a family dynamic, or whether that's a one-on-one relationship. I think people do. I think we are wired that way.
Yeah, we're social animals, right? And the if the pandemic taught us anything, it made non-huggers huggers.
I think
like
so.
Running around like.
I think so too. I mean, I think you miss it. Business handshake and like I said, so I've traveled around the country, and we never stopped doing the show even during the pandemic. We were doing places more like Florida and Texas and Arizona, and we couldn't really do Boston, New York, and San Francisco, but. the way people treated the absence of human contact or communication. A lot of people, and we're probably doing the same thing there, want to hide behind their devices, their Facebook pages, their dating profiles, their LinkedIn, all of that, and are afraid to sort of get out there face to face anymore, which, you know, in a business interaction, we rely on Zoom a lot now. I want to meet somebody. I want to sit down with somebody. I want to be across the table from somebody. I think that a lot of the walls come down. I believe we do a lot of podcasts out of the studio. They're better sitting down face to face.
No,
The body language, the nuance, the reading, the hidden cues, all of that is better with somebody.
no, agreed. And you know, when we originally started this, you know, you talked about the handshakes. I mean, that was our thing, right? Everyone needs a stick, and we needed a handshake, and we went live on location, and we did locations in South Africa and Dubai and Israel, wherever I was vacationing, and whether it's business or personal, and they just were so, you know, so much more engaging and such, right? And then you get kind of hooked on the StreamYard thing. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're like, well, I could have more exposure, and I could have, you know, more reach. But they aren't always, you know, you got to be a special kind of individual to take the StreamYard and be able to make it engaging.
The technology needs to enhance our relationships. It shouldn't be replacing our relationships. And that, you know, that's the coming storm.
Sure.
The coming storm. We've had Dr. Drew do our podcast, and he's done our live show a few times too. And he says that the coming story is that the person who's 14 years old now, by the time they get to high school, and maybe even sooner, they're going to be able to put on a helmet, date whoever they want virtually. They're going to call them by their name. He's going to be like, I want somebody who looks like Ariana Grande, and have a reasonably satisfying experience. They're also going to be able to travel wherever they want to go. And people are like, oh, it's not as good as if you really went to Croatia. Well, if you don't know, and you're like, this is awesome, you're basically putting yourself in the greatest video game ever. No risk, no cost, no risk of losing. That's the danger of technology when we letting it replace actual experiences.
Yeah, you know, if everyone remembers, you know, the real doll, they thought that was going to be like a big deal, you know.
I know.
And then, you know, I was talking to my wife the other day, and her bucket list is Greece, right? And the funny thing is like, you know, 3 months of seeing all her friends go to Greece and going in and out of there, she's like, you know what? I don't need to see it anymore.
Yeah, I know. Dude, I can't believe how many people are going to Greece and Italy right now. Like, did everybody just go? It was like somebody stepped on the hose for 2 years and then they let it go, and now everybody's traveling. Yeah, I think everything is about confidence and communication, and everything comes down to those two things when you're interacting with somebody. If that's a business transaction, if that's a partnership, if that's a relationship, those two things, we're not confident human beings anymore. I mean, I don't know if we ever were, but we were better at hiding it, I think. And the more ways we have to communicate with each other, the worse I think we've gotten at communicating with each other. And these are, you know, what I always try and do, whether it's through podcasting or through our live shows or whatever, is sort of break down those walls and let people take a chance and get out of their comfort zone and try and communicate again.
Yeah, because you're so much more focused when you're living outside your comfort zone, right? You know, you're just you know, if you could take that laser focus into your strengths and when you're comfortable, you know, it's going to be even better, right? So I think, you know, it's funny because relationships and businesses, you know, when you start to kind of push yourself and be more confident. Because even when you talk about buyers and sellers and you go in there, you know, what does the seller want? The seller wants someone to come in there and says, I am going to sell your home.
Right.
You know, they don't want, well, you know, we might sell it for a price that
Somebody
you
might
might
want
like. So we hope, you know, kind of thing. No, they want to
Right.
hear someone who's confident,
Right.
who's got statistics and credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they gotta obviously like, know, and trust you in most cases, not all the time, but in most cases they want to see a like, know, and trust kind of thing. And you know, and that goes on to the point of relationships.
Right.
You know, you have to build those relationships, but you have to be confident in those relationships as well.
Right. And you got to, you know, see that relationship for what it is and not always look at what it could be or what it isn't, or try and, you know, we do that a lot of times in business too. Like, oh, I think this person is going to lead me to the promised land. Like, everybody has to take sort of ownership of their own fate and the outcome. And willing to take a chance goes a long, long way. And you also, like you said, get out of our comfort zone. Somebody always asks me all the time, what's the biggest piece of advice I can give somebody? And I always say, get rid of the words, not my type. If you're over 30 and you're still single, you have no type. Your type's not working out for you. And if you're not quite 30, you don't know what your type is yet. And so it's about experiencing different places, things, individuals, people, getting out of your comfort zone and learning. You'll learn more about yourself sitting across from somebody that you believe has nothing to offer you than you ever would about that person. It's valuable life experiences, and that's why traveling is so valuable. Like you stimulate parts of your brain that you didn't know could be stimulated.
It's amazing. I met my wife on JDate.com back in
yeah.
2000, right? Like,
Old
in the
school.
early stages. And I remember a friend of mine saying, "Hey, you got to get on this thing." And so I get on it, and I'm like, I'm just gonna date as many women as I can. So like I kind of really treated it like a business.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I'm going to practice. I'm going to know what I like. I'm going to know what I don't like. And I'm going to eventually find something, someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And, and it's funny because you have to practice whatever it is.
You do. It's reps.
Yep.
And it's failure. The very best, like I said, I was a writer, director, producer for a long, long time in Hollywood. And the actors and actresses that were the best were the ones that learned pretty quickly in the business that if they did not get the part, it wasn't necessarily a referendum on their talent. It just meant they weren't right for this, or somebody didn't perceive them as right for this. I think in relationships or business, that having that mindset really does help avoid the loss of confidence. It's like, it just the situation didn't work out. On to the next. And you keep moving forward and you keep learning and keep trying, and you take the experiences and move it to a place where eventually you're going to find the one, whether it's the right house or the right job or the right wife.
So I'm going to ask you to put your real estate agent hat on.
Yeah.
And,
like every other California move in here in Florida.
Exactly. How are you going to build relationships differently? What would you do as a real estate agent going out in the business world and really trying to create and build relationships differently than everyone else? Because there's 1.5 million realtors in the nation, and that doesn't even include just the other licensees.
I think the thing that drives anything, whether it's a podcast or being a realtor or anything, is passion and curiosity. Those two things. And being able to brand yourself, or at least showcase as somebody who, like I said, not necessarily has all the answers, although somebody has to trust that you have most of the answers, but that your curiosity and your passion for the market or the people are going to continue, that you're still doing the work. A lot of people are like, I've had 30 years of experience in this business. I know things change in the world so quickly. They want to know that you're constantly looking for answers. You're constantly asking questions. You're constantly looking into new environments and markets and opportunities. People really like that. People really like that. Hey, I'm going down this road. Come along with me. And we're going to find an answer for you, versus just pointing the answers down that road. People really, really are engaged by that.
I love that, because why is it that you buy a BMW or a Mercedes when the Kia, the Yugo, the whatever it might be, is the same thing. It's going to get you to point A to point B.
Right.
You go to the Ritz-Carlton, or you go to a Motel 6. It does the same thing. It just makes you feel better, right? It's kind of like you have to feel it, right? And you talk about passion. So let's talk a little bit about podcasting.
Yeah.
Because podcasting has been around for a little while now, but has gotten significantly more popular.
It has.
And you're opening up studios around the country, right?
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about, how would you get started if someone's like, because we all have something to say.
I do, and it's understand that not only do we all have something to say, there's somebody or lots of somebody's out there who aren't just going to listen to you and think that's you. They're going to listen to you and think that's me. He thinks like me. He cares about the same things I do. He asks the same questions I do. And the ability now to reach an audience globally is easier than ever before. Podcasting is a very easy to produce and a very easy to consume medium. It really is just a conversation. we're sitting down having a conversation. We could be at a restaurant having breakfast with the broker, but instead there's no bagels here and I'm sitting here with you. But it is about a good podcast should sound like a good conversation, and the listener should feel like they're sitting right at the table with you. And so understanding what it is about you that drives the things, like I said, the passion, the curiosity, those two things go a long, long way. Other people that will resonate. And podcasting has gotten really big because we're such a ADD multitasking society
Squirrel.
that we want the information just put right into our brains while we're doing something else. You know, people are going to listen to podcasts while they're commuting or while they're working out or while they're waiting on the car line for their kids stuff. Like they do. I would have never thought, you know, even 15 years ago that we would podcast in audio form, at least would be sort of old school War of the Worlds style, like radio serials that people like. You know, the true crime and the scripted stuff is just giant. Right. And if somebody told you back in, 1994, you're going to listen to this stuff. And I'm like, why? I can watch it. Right. You know, it's changed. So a lot of people had some time, especially in the last couple of years, to think about what do they want to talk about? Who is the community? All podcasts are sort of a community of host and guest and listeners. And who do I want to be a part of? And how do I engage with this? So I always say, anybody with a Facebook page, you should have a podcast. Anybody with a brand, you should have a podcast, because you're really able to reach like-minded people. A good podcast can have all sorts of voices in the conversation. It shouldn't sound like an infomercial, and it shouldn't sound like a webinar. It should sound like people who are both engaged in the same thing. And, one of the reasons why one of the first places we opened was here in South Florida. There's a lot of big personalities here. The people have no fear. We, one of our first studios we opened in Ohio, which is lovely. People in Ohio think, I'm pretty sure I can do a podcast and hopefully somebody will listen. And people in South Florida are like, give me the microphone. A lot of people are going to listen. And that's a good thing. That confidence is just that what I have to talk about hopefully will resonate with a lot of people. And so I have been a podcaster for 8 years. I host 3 podcasts. Great Love Debate, which is the world's #1 dating relationship podcast since 2015. The Great Food Feud, which is about food, and Political Junkies, which is a political podcast. And like I said earlier, people are like, those seem all different. They're not. They're passionate conversations that I believe I can have with anybody. I mean, I've had celebrities on the show. I've had experts on the show, and I've had just some people I've grabbed off the street on the show. And they're all sort of the same because everybody's opinion sort of has value, at least to me, and a lot of ways their audience. So we produce now on a weekly basis, I don't know, a couple hundred different shows between our 6 locations, and they're about all sorts of things. Some are very, very niche. We have a school bus driver podcast called Big Yellow Podcast, and he's just targeting a huge audience of school bus drivers and parents and teachers and administrators. And so that audience grows from there. So no matter what somebody's, interest is, passion is, curiosity is, questions are, podcasting is just a really good medium for people to form a community.
How do you get started?
Well, that people come by podpopuli.com. We're right here in the heart of Boca, or go to podpopuli.com online. And we basically work backwards. Is we try and figure out who is the audience you're trying to reach, ideally, and that can change over time. What do you hope to get out of doing a podcast? What should your audience get out of doing a podcast? And sort of work backwards up to, and then we sort of create it. Every show we do, we try and produce as much as possible individually. Everybody's capable of having at least one podcast. I was in the book business for a little while. I always thought everybody had a couple hundred pages in the nightstand hidden away that either they're never going to finish or never going to show anybody. And our job is sort of pull the podcast out of you and create a show that's going to engage you and going to entertain people and going to be sort of a fulfilling venture for anybody.
So you're a political podcast, right?
Yeah.
So
Political Junkies.
Political Junkies. So, it was interesting. I was in the Senate building with Rick Scott. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that he said, it used to be that Republicans and Democrats would go ahead and argue about bigger government, less government, regulation, whatever, right? And now we've gotten to the point of where, like, we no longer seek different perspectives, right? Like we if you believe this, you're either with us or against us. So how, I think maybe we should send you, the relationship expert,
Yeah.
up there to
Well,
teach them, put them all in a room or
That's
something.
funny you bring that up. I did an interview the other day, and used to be that you might have been married to somebody for 5 or 6 years and not be entirely sure how they voted. It just
Right.
didn't really come up.
Sure.
Now, before the appetizer on date one, they want to know how you stand on Trump. They want to know Republican. Like, it's right there. It's on dating profiles. Like, these are my political views. And I'm like, that's crazy. Because even if you have differing political views, that difference, those are 3 or 4 differences out of thousands of things. And relationships are about bridging the differences, not necessarily spotlighting them and making them the crux of your relationship. And that is what it is now. Certain people are just like, it's already hard enough to find somebody. You're eliminating pretty much half of the population right off the bat before you get in any other criteria. I'm not sure that's a good way to go about anything.
It is crazy because it's almost like the political belief or I guess side, because you have to pick, and I would contest that most people are on the same side. They just have different ways of getting there, and
I agree. Political junkies. My job on that show essentially is to be the middle, and we sometimes get people way out on both fringes. They sound exactly the same.
Right.
Really, it's just you plug out this and plug out that. There was somebody I knew in California. She was going to buy a house, and the house was owned. She found out who the owner was, and he was like a prominent Republican donor. She wouldn't buy the house. I'm like, why are you blaming the house? Like, you think it's haunted? Like, I didn't understand that. She's like, I'm not going to give the money. I'm like, you're buying the house. It doesn't, people have lost their minds over the last 5 years. And people need to take one step back towards the other person again. And, you have to be careful in business. People won't want to do business with you if you're this way or that way, especially down here. It's
crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And there's something you can learn from anybody. And there's, like we said, 15 minutes ago, outside of your comfort zone is where almost all of the answers lie. Your yes lives in the land of no. And that's sort of where you have to push yourself to go. I'm going to hear them out. We did a great Love Debate show in Tel Aviv a couple years ago. The Israeli people know how to debate and then break bread after. They know how to have passionate conversations and not just, delete people after it. And it was really just a nice way to do it. I'm like, these people are, everything in Hebrew sounds like you're arguing for parking space anyway. But, they were able to express themselves in a way that didn't, wasn't personal, and it didn't deteriorate the fact that at the end of the day, they could still get along.
It's funny you say that because, when Israeli people had a survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about, being in the center of, religious, beliefs of all types, and they're accepting of all types of religions. They all live within one. I mean, Armenian Quarter, the Muslim Quarter, the Christian Quarter. I mean, they're all living within one, kind of community. And people don't see that, right? Unless you're actually there and kind of feel and experience it.
I was amazed when I go there, and people. Well, the one good thing is, I think a good percentage of the people are asking more questions and are doing the work. It's almost never that you haven't met the right person. It's almost always that you haven't been the right person. And that's about, being introspective enough and taking sort of a self analysis and look at yourself and saying, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? And how do I continually find the appeal in both myself and other people?
You got to get out of your own head.
You got to get out of your own head. Take a shot. Ask her out. Say hi.
Right.
Say hi.
Smile.
So a woman came to our show a couple of years ago in Chicago, and she shared an Uber pool with a guy. Do you remember what Uber pool is? Where you sort of shared ride thing. And she really liked the guy in the car. She thought she couldn't wait to get out of the car to find him online to say hello. Rather than turn her head right and say hello, that seems so weird to just do that. She needed to find a way to message him or something. And I'm like, well, this is where we are. That seemed crazy. It seemed too forward to say hello. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think we could take a page out of New York Prime Ladies Night. You go up to the bar at Ladies Night. I think it's Monday nights now in Boca. And, the 83-year-old woman comes up and starts eating off your plate. It's like there is no,
that's a good
move. The lion's den.
That's a good move. Just walk around with a fork and start grabbing bites. Yeah, that's
listen.
not bad. Yeah, take a shot. You know, if somebody doesn't react the way you want them to, that could be and probably is more about them than it is about you or anything you did. You might got somebody in the bad moment or a bad day or they're distracted. You know, you got to press on. You know, keep at it. Make a second offer.
I like it. You know, persistence is key. You know, I have an agent who is a big believer in persistence. When we used to have answering machines, and his name's Brian Bowles. So he's a big agent in Delray, and the funny thing is like when we had answering machines, he would say, "Dave, you got to listen to this," you know, and I don't remember their exact names, but it was like, so you know, and make a phone call. And I made the phone call, and it's like, "Hey, this is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Thank you for calling. Da da da. You know, if this is Brian Bowles, stop calling me." You know, and you know, you talk about persistence. You know,
Yeah.
you made it, right? You headed to the big leagues at that point.
I know. You know, there's everybody failed. Everybody, you know, things didn't work out they wanted to, whether that's a business situation or a job they thought was going to be great or a relationship or the house they wanted to flip. You know, it's not always working out, but it's learning, it's continuing to move forward. It's looking for new opportunities and relationships everywhere. There are, you know, people always say, you wrote a book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. Is that about like a quickie in the bathroom? And I'm like, no, it's about there are 60-second windows of opportunity that you can recognize, act on, and not dismiss, where anything can happen. And that happens many, many times a day in love and life and business and everything, that you have to be open to it and take the blinders off and recognize, like, every single day there's a chance that that person over there could change your life, hopefully in a good way.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on, and obviously, I always end the show on with two questions.
Yep. Oh, God.
One is, what is your all-time favorite streaming series, and what are you currently watching?
What am I currently watching? You know, oddly, I am rewatching Sopranos start to finish from the beginning. And because I watched them all at the time and I've watched a lot of them since. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to that moment in time because that's 25 years ago now when Sopranos first came out.
Right.
And watching them all in sequence and
It's crazy.
picking up
years.
Some of the stories and the nuances and the minor characters who I didn't really appreciate at the time. So I'm watching that. I'm rewatching Sopranos. I know that doesn't count as a streaming series.
No, it does. Absolutely.
I mean, it's HBO Max.
Now it's
whatever.
streaming.
Yeah, now it's streaming. I mean, I think that's a show that changed a lot of things, that just the level of storytelling and filmmaking and character development, like everything that fell from, I think, Sopranos tree, whether it's you're a fan of The Wire or Breaking Bad or Mad Men or everything, like everything changed, I believe, with The Sopranos.
Loved it. So that's your favorite streaming and you're currently watching. All right.
Yeah.
So I am currently watching one of my friends said, "Oh, you gotta do this." And I was never really a Star Wars fan. I think I saw the first 3 and then like episode 1, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Like, it's too weird, characters going back and forth. He said, "You know what? Do episode 1, episode 2, and all the way, like in chronological order, the way that it was supposed to be."
So
Like,
not start with A New Hope and not 4, 5, 6, and then one. Start with 1.
Start with 1 and go episode
wow.
2, 3, 4. So I'm through a couple of them now, and I'm like, whoa! Now the story makes sense, because the story didn't make sense before.
Right? You're
Like,
constantly, wait, is that Vader?
Right.
I know
Right.
that's not a bad way to do it.
So,
yeah. Is that who turns out that? That's not a bad way. You know, Star Wars holds up. The kids watch, at least, you know, the original. They watch it. They like it. I'm shocked at how many diners, drive-ins, and dives I can sit through.
Oh yeah.
And watch and Google their menu and see how close I am to them and everything. It's ridiculous. I've seen hundreds of them.
I've been to Wales 100 times.
I know. Down there. It's a bunch of them. I'm like, I'm within 40 miles of that place. Yeah, I know. It'll be on like Friday, Saturday nights. They just run like marathons over and over. And before I know it, I've watched like 7.
That's awesome. Brian, I can't thank you enough for coming in on Breakfast with the Broker every Tuesday at 9 a.m. It's interesting because you bring on the, guests and you've been instrumental in putting together this amazing studio that we've been in for the last few weeks, almost a month now. And we'll continue on. And, I certainly appreciate you and what your team has done. Also, if you are looking to be in a podcast, I know that you did a podcast camp with the kids and stuff like that.
It's great.
And
the kids have
really
no
cool.
fear. They're not afraid of a microphone. A lot of adults come in here and they're like, "Oh, is that what my voice sounds like?" Well, yeah, the kids know exactly what their voice sounds like. Yeah,
it's awesome.
All ages, entrepreneurs, small business owners, retired executives, kids, moms, everything should have a podcast.
Absolutely. Contact Pod Populi. And Brian, you can message him. He likes getting messages.
I do. I like getting messages.
Thank you so much. Breakfast with the Broker every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m.